All right, good afternoon, everybody. Who's heard me do my intro now about 3 times today? Anybody? The people in the back? My name's Don DeRay, and I'm the owner of Consensus Technologies. We're from Cranberry Township. We provide hardware, software, service, and support for any customer of any size. We also specialize in identity and access management and cloud-based technologies. I'm not going to go into a long discussion of what Consensus is. We're actually in the back there if anybody's interested. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to introduce Justin Driscoll from the Pittsburgh Technology Council.
All right. Thank you, Don. Good afternoon, everyone. So your last session for the day will be a little bit different, and the focus of it will be a little bit different than what you've had over these last couple of sessions today, if you've been in this room or some of the other rooms. We're going to shift our conversation, still talking about data, still talking about big data, but we're going to infuse people into this discussion. Because at the end of the day, people, that's what makes every organization function. People develop the culture, people are either engaged or not engaged, people are either a good fit or a bad fit for the role that they're working. And so I work at the Pittsburgh Technology Council, as Don had said, and we're a small organization. We sponsor this event and about 100 other events every year. We run a radio show. We have 3 different magazines. We have a job board. We do government advocacy. We do a lot with 16 people. And so for us, having the right people doing the right jobs was incredibly important. We didn't have the luxury, most businesses don't, but when you're a small organization, having the wrong person in the right role, let me say that again, having the wrong person in the right role is detrimental to the organization. It can be catastrophic to the organization. So we as an organization really value using data, using other tools to help us pick the right people for the right roles and develop our people internally to make sure they stay engaged. And so this is more of a case study today. We have been using this tool called the Predictive Index for a number of years, and it is truly leveraging data on people, data on jobs, in order to make sure that when we are recruiting, we're selecting the right people for the right roles. So really in about 15 minutes, I'm going to give you a case study and talk about the tool a little bit. So about 6 months ago, we were hiring a membership outreach person. In fact, it happens to be Andrea's role right there. So Andrea Kruger has been your hostess all afternoon and guide to make sure you all know what you're doing. This case study is actually about her role. I didn't really think about that when I was putting this together, so it's cool that she's here, so she can maybe chime in. When we were looking for this member engagement person, this person had to be not afraid to pick up the phone and call members. They had to be someone who was very almost outbound sales in nature. They had to be someone who was not going to take no for an answer easily. When someone says they don't want to renew their membership, it's not, okay, walk away, right? Maybe eventually that is, but we needed someone who had a very specific skill set and very specific behavioral makeup. And so when we put the job out onto our job board in other places, we received 75 job applications. 75. As a small organization with no really dedicated HR staff, what do you do with 75 resumes? What do you do? You begin to skim them. You begin to look at the ones that are clearly not relevant to the organization or clearly not relevant to the job, because as you know, of anyone who's hiring anyone, people seem to apply for jobs without even reading the posting. I'm breathing, that's a job opening, I guess I'm qualified, so I'm going to apply, right? That's, I think, the thought process that people use when they're applying for jobs. So with our own fortitude and hard work, we spent a lot of time whittling it down from 75 applications to 25 applications. So 50 of them were clearly unqualified. Still, 25 applications. 25 people that were marginally qualified or somewhat qualified for the role, we still had to have a way, we had to come up with a way to figure out how to handle these people. And so what we did was we used this tool called the predictive index. And we used the behavioral assessment tool for the candidate, and we used the job assessment tool for the job. So that when we went to our candidates and we sent them all the 7-minute assessment link, we were able to get a whole bunch of data on them to answer questions like this. What are their needs, desires, and drivers? What do they value? What knowledge and skills and experience do they have? We can get knowledge, skills, and experience from their resume. But what I don't know is what drives them, what is their cognitive makeup, and what are their values. And it helped us look at our job profile, which we created first, and then look at the behavioral assessment on all 25 of those candidates. And we had some data to really go to these candidates. So we had their resume, and we had their predictive index assessment, their behavioral assessment, so that we can make some really informed decisions about whether or not we think that person would be a good fit for this role, or if they would be a really nice person, but they would be a bad fit for the role. Because we couldn't afford to have someone show up at the interview one way and then walk into the office on day one as a completely different person. We had to avoid the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation. We had to have whoever showed up in the interview, we had to have them show up at work every day. And we had to understand what needs they have, what desires, what drivers they have. Because the whole person shows up at work. One person shows up at the interview, and sometimes another person shows up at work. So the predictive index is the tool we've been using to help us figure that out. I'm going to skip by some of these stats. Here's some stats that were staggering to us. If we just use unstructured interview, we have the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation. 6% chance of finding the right fit for the job. If you just interview and ask them questions that you think are relevant to the role, you think that will help you draw out information about them, about their experience, about their education, about who they are and what they've done to be successful in the past, 6% chance of finding the right person for the right role. This isn't about who's nice and who we like the best for the job. We want to know who's the best fit for the role, okay? 6% chance. If we include behavioral interview assessments and unstructured interview assessments, it's still not foolproof, which is what we did. We used behavioral assessments and we used an unstructured interview process. So we still, according to the research and the data, we still only have a 23% chance of finding the right person for the right role. If we use cognitive assessments alone in unstructured interviews, the data says 27% chance. What happens if you combine the two together? Greater than 50% chance, the bubble on the right there, greater than 51% chance of finding the right person. Because the whole person shows up. Their needs, their desires, their drivers, their personality, all are mixed into the behavioral assessment. The cognitive assessment is basically how quickly they can come up to speed, how quickly they can learn. Think about a sponge, and if you put that sponge in water, how quickly does that water absorb into that sponge? That's basically what a cognitive is. It's not an IQ assessment. It's a cognitive assessment. And so if we do the cognitive assessment and we do the behavioral assessment, we know we have a greater than 51% chance of making sure we find the right person. Okay? Quick background of the PI we learned. It was created in the 50s, originally developed for fighter pilots and bomber pilots. After World War II, the military was training all these pilots. But as you would guess, someone who's flying a fighter jet, think Top Gun, right? Totally different behavioral makeup than a bomber pilot. Much bigger aircraft, heavy, takes off, flies way, way, way high, very planned, very structured. Totally different makeup for a bomber pilot. So this was originally military research. Now the tool is being used in 8,000 organizations since 1955, and it's the most administered tool behavioral assessment tool in the world right now. So that 2.5 million times in 2016, I believe it's over 3 million for 2017. So it's growing rapidly. These are the things that the PI, this is what attracted it to us. This is why it was so attractive to us. Because it's a tool that we can use for attracting candidates, selection and promotion. It allows us to create the job design under strategic organizational development. It allows us for change management, innovation, and leadership development. So as an organization, we have used it for all of these things, especially on coaching and conflict resolution. You know, in any company, any size, you know, you're going to have conflict. And it allows the managers to look at the PI of all of their employees, and allows us to make sure we have the right people doing the right jobs. So we had those 25 jobs, to go back to my story, we had those 25 candidates, we had the job profile, we sent the PI to all 25 candidates, and only 3 of the 25 matched the job profile that we created. So we said in the job profile, if we find someone that looks like this, they will be successful in that role. If we find someone who is a fit on, or close to a fit in all 4 of the factors, which I'll show you in a second, we believe that person will be successful in that role. And only 3 were even a fit. So then, okay, they're a fit from a behavioral standpoint. That's still only 23%, right? So what do? So we bring them in and we interview them. They meet with the team. We look at their resumes. We look at all of their credentials and their work history and their references, and we still do all that stuff. But we've brought in some data, and if you want, peeking under the hood, if you will, of that person to be able to look and see what they're really like when they're outside of that interview, okay? Because everyone has these motivating needs, behaviors, and drives, and that's what drives them to do their job either well or disengage very quickly. So the goals for us were to help us better understand ourselves and understanding of others as well. What's my natural communication style? Am I comfortable with conflict? Am I comfortable with delegation or not? How do I handle risk? Do I like to be in control all the time? These are the types of questions the PI begins to answer for people. Okay? So these are the four factors. Dominance, extroversion, patience, and formality. So dominance is the drive to exert one's influence on people and events. Extroversion is the drive for social interaction with other people. Patience, the C factor, is the drive for consistency and stability. And finally, D is the drive to conform to rules and structure. Okay? So we had to have people, let me flip over here to this. This was our job profile right here. Okay? So we wanted someone with an A factor kind of on the middle, a B factor that was high, a C factor that was low, and a D factor that was in the middle. So anything to the right of this triangle is high, and anything to the left of the triangle is low. And as you can see from Andrea's actual job profile, or her actual PI assessment, look how close it is. Look how close it is to matching. So Andrea and the job that we were looking for was a A on the midpoint, a high B, a low C, and a D on the midpoint. Okay? So we wanted someone who could be encouraging and reassuring as a low A, someone who didn't really like conflict that much. They liked harmony more than friction, but they could also be independent in recognition of ideas. Anytime you have a factor that's right in the middle, they can behave either as a low or a high A, low A or a high A. Okay, so Andrea was right in the middle. She exhibited characteristics of both A factors. Okay, the B, we needed someone with a high B, someone who was very socially high social interaction, someone who was liked a lot of social acceptance and recognition, outward facing, was energized by people, not drained by people. That's what we needed, as you can see here. Look how high this B factor comes out here. We needed them to really, really love being with people, meetings, networking events, being out in front. We needed someone like this, okay? We also needed them to be a low C. What's a low C? They needed variety, lots of change of pace. They needed to be mobile. They needed to be a little bit frustrated with the same. As someone in this role, they were always talking with new members every day. new member, new member, new member. The next day is never the same as the last day. They don't have a lot of processes they follow per se, but they needed to be with people all the time. Events, networking, meeting with their members, figuring out ways to solve their problems. That's what we were desiring with this low C, okay? And we needed a D kind of on the midpoint. What's that mean? We needed both of these. Someone who could be a little bit of both. We needed them to be very specific in their job knowledge, but we also needed them to be able to delegate details, and we didn't want them to be so rigid in their structure. We needed a little bit of both, okay? And so, as you can see here, we started with this. We built this as a company, said if we can find this, and obviously there's a lot of verbiage and description behind this one here before we ever get to this. We spent a lot of time creating the job profile to say what does success look like before we ever talk to a candidate, okay? So when you're using the PI to recruit, you're starting with the job profile. The company is taking the assessment and saying, if we find this, it's success. If we find someone who looks like this, we believe they'll be successful. In our case, we went from 75 resumes, we eliminated 50, got it down to 25, sent the PI to all of them, and the only 3 of them looked like this. So we interviewed those 3, and one of them happened to be Andrea Kruger, who's sitting here today. So for us, it was a huge time saver. Really, and we've used it recently, again, for an events manager role, another woman on staff who's out at our registration desk. So for us as a small company, is great. It's great for companies who have high turnover jobs. It's great for companies who are hiring a lot of salespeople. We've talked with a lot of companies who use it for sales. Are they outside sales or are they inside sales? Not every salesperson is created equal. Some of them are really good at farming, right? Some of them are really good at taking an existing book of business and farming that and getting them to increase that business. Other people are really good at that outside sales, pounding on those doors, finding the networking events, not taking no for an answer, not being afraid of conflict, not being afraid to be out in front. We call those the hunters, right? So the PI is really good for companies who have had issues finding the right person for the right role. They don't have a whole lot of time to recruit and don't have a whole lot of time to spend on recruiting as well. Lots of big companies use it too, but I definitely see the value for smaller and medium-sized companies who are moving so quickly that hiring can be a big distraction. And so this is the tool that we use, and we continue to use it and work with our member companies on it as well now too. So myself and Andrea have gone out after going through this for a couple of years, said, hey, I think some of our smaller member companies would love to work on this too. So we get a chance to work with our member companies on their individual hiring needs as well as consultants on the PI. So that's the PI. That's how we've used it. What questions do you have about the PI? Daria. Do they need this microphone? If you want to be recorded, you have to come up here.
My name is Daria Crawley, and I'm from Robert Morris University. Do you map this back onto their performance review later on so they can see themselves how they're progressing in the role, if there's some opportunities for strength or growth opportunities?
Yeah, so as you would guess, it's an iterative process for us, and the more we've infused this into the organization, managers are beginning to use it in performance planning and performance process. What we have done, though, is everyone has posted something like this on their cubes, and so we've all gone through a half-day training, and we've given the employees a kind of a PI 101, if you will, and so everyone understands, she's a high A, a high B, a low C, and a low D. We have infused that vocabulary into the organization so that we can, when we're working with someone, we can understand that a little bit better, and managers are I wouldn't say with every employee, but sometimes they're pulling out the PI, reminding the employee of their PI, and they're reminding themselves, why do they behave like that? It also is great coaching. Your job requires this, you're naturally wired like this. Let's talk about that, how we can overcome some of those challenges. Because not everyone is like this. Doesn't mean you fire them, but it gives you data on them to help them, to help you as a manager manage them better, to help them as an employee coach them through some challenges they might have for that role. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Travis with Compass Systems. What were the types of questions that you asked applicants like Andrea to really fill in these different algorithms?
Oh, so there are two questions. The first page, there's two pages. One of them is, how do you expect other people expect you to behave? How do other people expect you to behave, basically? And there's a whole screen of adjectives. And so that's the first question. And then the second question is, how do you naturally behave in the work environment? And then there's a whole bunch of adjectives that they can choose from, okay? And so based upon those two, and many people who take it go, that's not enough questions. I don't understand how they even get to that. But then when they get the results, they go, oh my goodness, that nailed me 100%. Just based upon two very large questions, basically.
Was it like choose like the top 5?
No, it's columns of adjectives. And as you go through it, you choose the ones that apply to you and leave the ones that don't apply to you blank.
In certain situations.
No, just based upon that question. How do other people at work expect you to behave? And there's a whole bunch of adjectives. They expect me to be conservative. They expect me to be a risk taker. They expect me to be outgoing. They expect me to be, all through it. It's a whole bunch of different options just in those two large questions. Yes, in the back.
Can you take the PI? Is there online you could do it just for yourself?
Yeah, I can send you a link to do that, sure. Yep.
Is there anything that prevents you from throwing out people who would have been a good fit because you set up a bad profile?
Ha, great question. That's why it's imperative that you set the profile up correctly. So like anything, when you're new to something, you're a little bit more passionate and dogmatic about things, meaning when I first began to use the tool, if a candidate didn't hit on all 4 factors, we might pass them over, okay? Now, as we've matured a little bit in how we use the tool, we would look equally at their behavioral assessment and equally at their resume and experience and how they came to us, right? How were they referred to us? Because they're not a match in all 4 factors, typically we're asking ourselves, which of these 4 factors do we absolutely have to have? Typically there's 2, maybe 3 of these factors that have to be a hit or a match for most companies to move forward with a candidate. But it's EEOC approved, and as long as you have a job profile, EEOC compliant rather, as long as you have a job profile attached to it, you can use it for making hiring decisions. So, but you do have to be, like anything, knowledge is power, right? You have to be careful with that power. And so making sure that you don't pass over someone just because they might have missed on one of the 4 factors. It is something you have to be careful of. Any other questions? Yep.
What
There.
kinds of questions were you asked to fill out the company profile about the job? So similar to how you answered his question,
Yeah.
what were the questions you had to fill out?
They're very similar to those questions, but about that role. What is expected of that person, and how do you expect them to behave? It's only 3 questions. It's 3 questions, and then there are adjectives that they choose, that the company would choose. And so, like, if me, you, and Andrea all took the job profile assessment, if we were creating a job profile for that role, we would take it, and then there's software in the back end that merges our answers together to create one job profile. And the software allows us to drag these factors around in real time. And okay, well, we all said we want this person to be a high A, but Justin said that we want them to be a low A. Let's talk about that. Why did you say that? Why did I choose that? And then the software allows us to move them around to create a final version of the job profile. And there's verbiage around it, and as you would guess, I had 18 minutes, so I flew through much of this. There's a lot behind this, and the software and the reporting and the reports that go with each candidate and each job. But I'm happy to talk with you afterwards as well. All right. Well, thank you very much. Have a great day, and thank you for coming.